Hello, my friends. So I just completed a 2-hour drive from Ephesus to a temple complex called Lagina. I've been here a number of times, and it's behind me now. I'm going to walk down to it and explain to you a little bit about what it's all about. In any case, like a lot of you who were at home in Christianity or still are, like I am, or other belief systems, a lot of us have been becoming aware that there's a dire need to wake up to the divine feminine. Patriarchy has ruled the world for over 2,000 years, if not longer. I normally connect patriarchy with Christianity, but it actually precedes that. Interesting enough, I made a number of films in Italy recently and also in Samos, both entitled Don't Be Such a Homer. So Homer is very important for the Western world because he authored the Iliad and the Odyssey, and also the hymns of Homer. And he was blind, but all of the Greek mythology was built up on his work. And about a couple of years ago, I was on the island of Samos visiting the great temple of Hera there, which was one of the biggest temples, if not the biggest temple in the Hellenic period. And I discovered an article written by a university student called The Domestication of Hera. Unfortunately, it's been taken off the internet. And it's a thesis that she wrote, and she argues that quite powerfully and quite properly that because of Homer's work, we moved away from matriarchy and veneration of the divine feminine through various goddesses, and we moved deeply into patriarchy. Matter of fact, she even says Hera has nothing to do with, here are these mulberry berries, they're almost irresistible, but because the elevation of this temple is high, they're not quite ripe. Down in Ephesus, they're ripe. These are young mulberry berries, okay. And I have the article if anybody wants to get it from me. I think she probably got a job at the university and they probably forced her to take it offline because it was pretty radical what she wrote. She said that Hera pre-exists the Greek mythology, and she's right. And that even before Leto became pregnant with Artemis and Apollo, Artemis had a life which preceded Apollo, preceded by centuries and centuries, okay? Don't worry, we're going to see the temple. I just want to explain this to you because for me this is very emotional to come here. And even though I've been here a number of times, I see it totally different this time, and I know I will. And there's this idea, which I embrace fully, that in Anatolia here, this landscape here, which is extraordinary, the original gods were actually goddesses, and they're called in Greek Chtonic goddesses because they had a deep relationship with the underworld. I hope the wind's not going to distort this. A deep connection with the underworld and also with the caves and shadows. And Hera is one of them. Sibylla is definitely one of them. Artemis is without a question one of them. And there you have to make a distinction, and that's what I'm going to do today, between how we traditionally define a goddess like Hecate, based on the books from Hesiod and Homer, and all the forms that she took over the centuries. But more important for us, I think, is the link to go back to her source. And this temple complex, which we're going to explore together, is probably the temple complex where you can actually relate to this great goddess. Because in her Anatolia expression, she was rather pure. Okay, now you can see that they've done some excavation. I'll switch this around soon. She was rather pure in her, and very, very powerful. So sometimes you see Hecate presented with three heads, and that's a Roman distortion of her. Has nothing to do with the original Hecate, which we're going to experience here, because the Romans decided to give her three heads. I mean, first the Hellenic Greeks adopted her, and they were the ones who built this temple. The Romans then took it over. And the Chtonic goddesses are very important because their message or their power is not at all accessible through translations of books and cultures. Really, that's my deep belief, you know. I say that because I've been, you know, my search, my awakening to the Divine Feminine happened with Sophia about, my goodness, about 15 years ago, because I'm a healer, you know, and I was trained by one of the greatest healers, Daskalos, of our times. And Daskalos trained me to be basically a riverbed for the Christ energy and the archangels. And then suddenly the Divine Feminine was there, and it was identified, or it made itself known as Sophia, you know, which is Chokmah for the Jews. And then it moved on, and then suddenly I became very much aware of Artemis, because I made visits here, and I had an encounter with Artemis about 8 years ago, which hasn't let me go. And I built up a website for her called The Veils of Artemis, and also a Facebook site called The Veils of Artemis. And you could say the same things here, is that with Hecate, she's very well known for magic, for witchcraft. God, they've done some work here. I wonder what they're doing. And for the crossroads and all these things. And this all came afterwards. Okay, there's even some inscriptions, I think in Ephesus, where they describe her as a very benevolent and life-giving goddess. And this is the nasty play of history, is that you take a goddess who is actually life-giving and life-supporting, and then you give her attributions which are sometimes have negative connotations. They've done a lot of work here. I wonder what they're doing here. Let me see. I'll turn this around soon. And I'll start. But I just want to get that off my chest because, you know, like I said, I've been here a couple of times before with groups. Matter of fact, I'll be here with a group in November this year. And hopefully Carla UNESCO is going to join us. I think she kept that free in her calendar. She is known as the Artemis expert. I call myself an Artemis amateur because my knowledge doesn't compare to her, but my passion, and we joke about this, compares to her. We're going to come here. We're going to come here together for about an 8 or 9 day trip. We're going to be based in Ephesus, and then we're going to make excursions, for example, to here together. I'm the only one here now, by the way. And also to 3 different Artemis temples, and also to Aphrodisia, and also to sanctuary for Demeter, and a lot more. It's going to be a deep, and also because I went to a place yesterday called Metropole, which I've never been to, and I discovered a cave there which was probably used to celebrate Sibylla. And actually one of my goals here today is, I'm sure if I look around closely, because behind me is the temple, I will find evidence that probably even before they built this beautiful temple to Hecate, they were celebrating other forms of the Divine Feminine. Okay, so thank you for taking the time. This video will probably be long, but I keep trying to make them shorter and it doesn't work. Okay, because I love to share my passion. I have some knowledge about these places, and so you're welcome to listen or to shut this off, or you're welcome, definitely welcome to join us in November. It's going to be extraordinary. Okay. All right, so now I'll start the tour. Now we're going to be looking at this is excavation they've been doing. They removed all this earth, and this is all new. And they've done some excavation here as well, and also cemented some stones. And I wonder what they're up to. I mean, they have an idea of what's you know. Most of this, like I said the other day, a lot of this was covered by landslides because of the torrential rains that visit this area. However, you can see that because up there you see the level of the earth there, and then you see the level here of the I forget what it's called, but this is where the people would be greeted here in this round building here. There's a gecko, and they found here this fascinating structure. I had no idea what it is. No idea. It must have been made for rituals because these channels carved in were probably used for either water or for blood even. Fascinating. And this is why they're doing that now, because they know that if the earth was there because of landslides, and they uncovered this already about 30 years ago, they know that underneath here, if they remove the earth very carefully, which I'm sure they're doing, the Turks are actually very impressive now with their excavations. They were, I'm sorry to say this, I don't want to offend any Turks, but they were well trained by the British, who were the first ones here, and then also by the Austrians and the Germans and the French who came as well. So they know what they're doing now. At first, archaeology was very foreign to them because it didn't belong to their culture. And this is not that old. And there you see the so-called Lego stones that are around here. So this is totally different than when I was here last. But we don't need to focus on this. If we come back together in November, we'll probably have an idea of what they found here. It looks like they might have been a little bit disappointed because you see some stones here, they're properly marked, but you don't see a lot. It could be much deeper actually. There's some stones there. And this is also very fascinating. Okay. There's the house of the archaeologist there in the back. Okay, but let's focus on the temple. Look at the size of that olive tree. Look at that. You know, sometimes when you have a goddess who is celebrated, then the trees that grow on the land are enormous. And an olive tree normally grows very round, but this one grows towards the sky. So as I said here, I'm sorry, I'm just rambling, but you know me by now. This was a reception hall here. This is where the people would come. There's a neighboring town, which is I think about 10 or 15 kilometers down the road, and there's a sacred street as well. So that's the connection with this town. I can't pronounce the town. It's called Strata something. I might go there afterwards, but it's basically a Roman town. Nothing against the Romans. And here you see the original steps. And so the visitor to Hecate would come here first and be received by the priest and be prepared for a visit to the temple. And it's a beautiful building. Very much a home to the geckos here. Incredible building. And here is there's a gecko. Okay. Maybe the priest would be here and then would greet the devotee as they came to visit Hecate. You see some crosses carved in here. And here's a description. So it's called a propylon and described as an entryway. Okay, so then people would come then by boat and then reach the city and sleep in the city. And then the next day they would come here by foot over the sacred path, which was traditional throughout the Hellenic Empire. Okay, and now I'm going to move around. Now what's really interesting about this temple, and somehow it fits to Hecate, is there's a temple and then there's an altar. And normally the temple and the altar are aligned in a cardinal direction. Okay, but in this case, it's a dog leg. That means there's an angle between the temple, which is there, and the altar, which is there. And I haven't heard an explanation, but I haven't really studied it much, because that's very unusual, okay? Normally it would be perfectly aligned with each other, you know, either in an east-west or north-south, and probably east-west mostly. And in this case, it's not. So let's first walk up into the temple. And behind it they built a city, which we can also take a look at. I think that's probably more of a Roman construction. And what I suspect, if there was a celebration of Kabila, it would be there on the altar of Hecate. Because as we know, the ancients were very keen and aware and sensitive to power places. And that's why they would build their sanctuaries there. And the cultures that came afterwards knew that. Look at that, it's gorgeous. Isn't that gorgeous? I'm sorry, it's just gorgeous. And then you see an old stone like that, and you start thinking about an earlier culture. Okay, so now, as it were, even though I'm a mere mortal, I'm allowed to walk up into this temple and take a look and take a feel. There's a big gecko, beautiful. They're at home, very much at home in Hecate's energy. I had to tell you, I was very apprehensive with Hecate. I could embrace Artemis in a second, and even Kabila, but I found Hecate a little wild. And I know why, because she doesn't belong to the Olympian gods. She doesn't belong to any tradition, you know. And I needed to have a belief system which could explain to me who the goddess was or is. And here you see underneath this is interesting. Now you see underneath the foundation of this temple stones. And I would have to suggest that that's not a typical foundation for a temple in Anatolia or in Greece, because they would normally build a very strong understructure, very strong like that. And that might indicate, it might well indicate that they built this structure on old stones because there pre-existed here a temple to a more archaic goddess, which to me, it's pretty clear that would point to Sibylla. Okay, that's just my observation. And then, so this is where they would actually prepare the animal to be sacrificed. See, this is what I'm saying. You know, when you start to awake to how and where they celebrated divine goddesses, it was almost always in caves. Almost always in caves. And that's why when I go here now to look at the place where they sacrificed maybe the animal, sometimes they sacrifice dogs apparently, but I think that has nothing to do with Hecate. Then you see this original stone structure, which is very rough and not very fine. And that points to the fact that probably here pre-existed a sanctuary to a deity which has a relationship to Hecate, Sibylla, much more than Artemis, if you ask me. The only similarity that Hecate and Artemis have together is they're both known as the torchbearers. Apart from that, not very much. Sometimes they try to conflate Artemis with Hecate, and I just don't see the connection. I see much, much more connection with Sibylla. So this is a town they built up afterwards, or around this temple complex. See, they did this really properly. They gave a number when they found it, and they gave a number to that, and they tried to put them together properly. Yeah. So, like I said, the design of this temple is very unique, because the direction that this face is there. And now I'm going to move down into the altar. You see, they always played these games here, the children. They had a lot of time. A lot of time. And you can see that it's not perfectly aligned. To the contrary, it's off at an angle. And that's not an accident. And now when I look at this and look at the stone base to this temple, then when we go over there, we might see a corresponding base to the altar. So in other words, they had no choice. They would have to then build. There was another building here between the two of them, linking the two of them. You can see it if you look on the internet. Here's a staircase down, marble, or staircase up and down. And so it would lead to the altar, where they would bring then the offering to the goddess Hecate. I keep saying it in German and English, I don't know. Anyhow, I have to decide on one or the other. And then, this is what I'm trying to get at. Poppies. It's so nice to be here alone. Now if we look at this structure, now we're going up on the altar, okay? This is the Holy of Holies, as it were. And that's unique, because normally the Holy of Holies would be in the temple. And now, again, you see, and this is fascinating, you see a structure here which is not at all fine, but the stones that they put around it, all this carved marble, is very fine. And even here, there's a trench which goes down into the earth. Now you wonder if that was excavated or if that was always there, because that would be an indication that they celebrated Kabila here before Hecate, because both Kabila and Hecate are goddesses of the underworld. Artemis not, much less. She has a form as a torchbearer. And this is, if you look at all this, you know, this is not typical Greece to pile together stones as an under construction for an altar. Not at all. They wouldn't do that. They would care too much, and they would make an under construction like this, a stone, a massive stone on a massive stone. And this to me is a very clear indication that after the celebration of Kabila, it didn't come to an end, but was then given over to Hecate, then they would keep the sanctuary to Kabila here and there, and then build a new temple directly on the pre-existing temple to harness the energy from the goddess and actually transfer it into Hecate. Fascinating. I thought I would go around there and find a cave, and I probably would, but I think I found it here, because I think that explains why the under construction of both the temple and the altar is so unusual and so primitive, because they couldn't remove these stones because it was sacred. They couldn't. So what they did was they put these huge blocks here, some marble, almost all marble, and then built directly on top the sanctuary for Sibylla, the Hecate sanctuary. Fascinating. Okay, so I think that brings us full circle. You can see here, I'm going to take a walk here, but that's probably not interesting to you folks, because that's Roman. But if I spy a cave, I'll film again. Yeah, fascinating. So much love to you all from the Hecate complex here in Lagina. And if you want to join us, there's place remaining. I hope that Carla can take part. She promised to. Be nice to do that with her because we both share the same passion for not only for the Greek goddesses, but the Chtonic goddesses. And all these gods and goddesses, all these gods, Artemis, Hecate, Sibylla, Magna Martha, they were all Chtonic goddesses who had no male counterparts, period. None of them had a male counterpart. Okay, that's why, nothing against Homer. I had fun making these videos, don't be such a Homer. But there the transition starts to take place. Away from the matriarchy, and we're talking about now 800 years before Christ, the Christian era, and going pretty rapidly into patriarchy, where Artemis was placed lower than Apollo. Hera was definitely placed below Zeus. So that was a turn in history, and we're in the middle now of a major paradigm shift as a result of that, where we now can embrace the divine feminine, and in doing so embrace the earth and the animal kingdom. On my way here, I had to stop to relieve myself because I drank so much water, and the turtle was in the middle of the road. And the cars were driving by, but the Turks are so nice, they would never run over a turtle. And I just went to the turtle and I said, listen, buddy, let me bring you to safe lands. So these are all Greek and Roman carvings here. And yeah, so I'm just going to walk around here and enjoy this place. And it's so nice. I don't want to be egoistic, but it's so nice to be here alone. Okay, take care, my friends. And like I said, if I discover a cave, I'll be back online.